From leaderships to lawyers, on this episode of the Taproot Podcast, we're going to be talking about who should be on your investigation team. I'm joined by Amy and Marcus today to go through this topic. And I want to start this off with, why is it important that you think about who should be on your investigation team?
You want me to start?
Sure.
So I can't imagine anything worse than trying to respond to a serious incident and at the same time trying to figure out who needs to be on the team, right? Because all your efforts should be focused on, let's jump into this incident, start our investigation, not like, okay, let's waste 2 days trying to figure out who's available, who should be on our team, what kind of skills do they need, do they have investigation kits, like all that stuff needs to be set up front.
Absolutely.
So you don't have to waste time worrying about that when you get the call that there's an incident you have to go investigate.
That evidence is just deteriorating and people's memories are fading, so having that teed up quickly is important.
And there's a lot of different ways people might get into these kind of situations. Sometimes your investigators aren't on site. Maybe they're a corporate team that has to go investigate. Sometimes it's people that are always on site, and therefore you can jump right into your role. So I think there is some defining that needs to happen. When we give instructions to people about their investigation teams, typically you have to have a facilitator. That's someone who knows Taproot, in our case, someone who knows the investigation process. And then there's different people with different skill sets that you might have on depending on severity. So what are some kinds of things you would consider in a team that you're trying to put together? What kind of considerations would you need to make when putting together a team?
Well, first, I think you have to decide what type of instance has what type of team. Like if you have something pretty serious, I'll start off, you'll probably need legal involved. You're going to need a legal representative on your team if it's a serious incident to give direction to keep everybody out of trouble.
Oh, lawyers, getting them involved right away. That's going to be fun for everyone involved.
It's good to have your legal involved from the jump. You want to make sure that everyone's aligned on that and you don't make a mistake early on that's going to cost you a lot later. So it might make you a little cringy, Alex, but the earlier you involve them, the better it is. And, they're really looking out for your company's best interest, and it's important to have them there.
Yeah, and your investigation policy should, they have it defined, this type of incident has this team on it, right? The team members already, not individuals' names, but the roles that are going to be played. Like I think for another serious incident, a good role, you need an executive sponsor. Somebody that can ensure that people free up their time to take part of it, be ready for interviews. The team gets the resources that they need because it is pretty serious. We have to respond appropriately. Somebody high level that can make sure that our team gets all that information.
So I think when you're separating out high-risk investigations from lower-risk investigations, there is some different considerations that you've got. Again, like you're saying, that high-risk executive sponsors, legal, those are two people as well that typically some companies have not gone out of their way to train on investigations. Now, they've got exposure to it being in leadership. They've probably been exposed to RCAs in some form or capacity. And same with corporate legal. They have their own type of training that they've typically been through on these and experience. But that's something that we've done in the past, which is targeted training towards that leadership level so they can understand what goes into a good investigation. That way they can support the team. If it's maybe on a lower severity level, or maybe any severity level, there's other things that you need to have on the team. And I typically think of two things that you should always have, and it's two different types of expertise. You've got operative expertise, and you've got, I'll call it office expertise, which is you've got people that understand the standards behind work. We have these machines, this type of equipment, it's supposed to run this way. That's your engineers, your quality, your safety experts. And you've got people that understand what it's like in the field doing the job. If you've got somebody that was hurt on the job, you need someone on your team that's done it before, because you need to know what right looks like, what wrong looks like, and you need to understand context of, hey, in this situation, what kinds of things come up in day-to-day activities. So having those different levels of operational experience, I think, is also critical.
Well, yeah,
Absolutely.
because there is evidence that's critical to collect for an effective root cause analysis. And if you don't have those type of people on your team, somebody that can show you, well, here on the perfect day, this is the proper way to do things because they've done it before, they know how it's supposed to work, maybe supervisors are involved. So when you go out there and investigate, you're asking questions. If there's any discrepancies between the proper way to do it and what you find that day, that has to be evidence that you're going to use when you go through your analysis.
So I can think about times when I've seen investigation teams that were put together and they went through all this process of mapping out these things and they've gathered facts and evidence, and then you get one person in the room that goes, that's not how that happens. This isn't how it works. And a lot of times with teams, as you're getting that information, you really do need to make sure you've got the right people in the room that understand the process, because you might have somebody in there, maybe they're a supervisor and they did it 10 years ago. That was their experience 10 years ago. But what is it like today? What is it like with the technology that you're using today, or the experience level of the operators, the training people received? So having an understanding of who. Now, what's your opinion on if you have the injured person in the team? Is there anything that you would need to be concerned about by having, let's say, the person that got injured involved in the investigation team?
I'd probably shy away from that because I don't think you want any bias involved in your investigation. I think you need a representative for that person, like somebody who does the work like you were talking about before, somebody that understands what that person goes through every day. Because you want people on the team that's going to tell you, well, that's not really how it works, right? You need that. But the person that was injured, maybe, they're not going to be as objective as you need a team member to be. That would be my opinion.
I mean, it's obviously someone you need to interview throughout the process,
Yes.
but being on the team, I think that's a different story.
Yes, an interviewee for sure, right? You have to get their viewpoints and what happened, but to be on the team, then you'd have a chance to affect the outcome, I think.
And I think depending on level of severity too, it could be traumatic for that person. I mean, just being interviewed could be traumatic. Being a part of the team, and I don't think I'd recommend it either.
Yeah, so it's definitely something that you have to take into big consideration. Definitely you have them involved. And we've seen this where people will bring someone in and have them review a snap chart that was built because they went through it and say, hey, what's right, what's wrong? That's one of the techniques we talk about when doing interviews. But as far as the root cause analysis portion, there is a level of you need to step back and say, hey, the corrective actions that we're proposing, talking to the person that got injured about those might be valuable. So I think there is a level, you may not have formally, they're in every meeting, but you probably should run by both what happened and the corrective actions. I can think of a case where looking at a set of corrective actions, they had an incident where somebody fell and pulled something off a table almost onto themselves. And looking at the corrective actions, none of them seemed like they would have made a difference on the face value of it. They were talking about putting in a handrail thing for the person that was stepping off this ledge that fell. There was conversations about blocking ledges on things. But if you actually take the corrective actions proposed and you bring it to the person that was involved in it, you say, hey, would this have changed your behavior or how you would have acted in this situation? You can get a picture and saying, oh, no, I wouldn't have done anything different. Even if this had existed, it still would have been the same, the same result would have still happened. And so you do want to look at those because, I changed the procedure. Yeah, but we don't require people to use this procedure. It's just you added a line in a document nobody looks at. So you could have those kind of moments where you really probably should run your corrective actions by a person of the similar job title level. We talk about reviewed by operators for unintended consequences. So I think there's a reason why you might do that depending on your facility, might be the person that was injured.
I can see that because if it is somebody falling and they're just reacting, they don't have time to go through a checklist of, in their head, oh, maybe I should do this, maybe I should do this, or no, this is the safest thing to do not to fall. It doesn't quite work like that, does it?
Now, another complicating variable might be when you're working with contractors or suppliers. What are some things that might complicate an investigation team when it comes to different groups being involved in an investigation?
I see in what I do here at the company quite a bit when you're including third parties, making sure those agreements are put in place early on. You know, if you're going to bring in other subject matter experts from different companies to come into your company to help with this investigation for whatever reason, you really, really, really want to try to get all of that lined up ahead of time. So here we have master service agreements, and we have some clients of ours where we've got all of that hashed out between procurement and legal and ready to go. If someone needs us for some reason, we have that master service agreement in place. So I would highly recommend, if you think you're going to need subject matter expertise from outside of your company, to find those resources before an incident and have all those lined up. Now, they might not be on your team, but you're bringing them in to help.
And I know I've seen companies do that for like third-party equipment experts. So they'll pay for a service of a company that can get them an expert in anything, and they pay that service to have that hotline so that the person can get there quickly. And they've got a list of their experts that they have agreements with.
Oh, yeah, companies that analyze different things, and absolutely.
So having those equipment analysis, third-party things like that, have them lined up. But also there's incidents where, let's say you're a management company and you have multiple contractors that are different contractors involved in one incident. So I might have 3 or 4. There's an electrical contractor, there's a buildings contractor, and you've got these different groups in an investigation. What kind of advice would you give to who should be on a team and how you should coordinate across these other groups?
Well, I think if you do have clients or contractors or vendors, and it's possible that one day there could be an incident and you all have to work together, there's got to be some kind of common ground, right? There's got to be some kind of training on, this is the technique we use, this is how it happens, this is how we make sure it's objective, just to keep everybody from getting defensive. If it's the contract company's fault, like if it's they're going to try to hide things, right? Just, that's human nature. So just agreeing up front with all your vendors, all your contractors, hey, this is the methodology we're using, this is how here's the purpose, and make sure that there's somebody there to ensure that they're available to be part of the team.
I think back to our 5-day course, we've got the fish kill incident, and I won't spoil it for those that want to go to the 5-day course later, but that fish kill incident's a really good example of, you've got a company that's brought an investigator in, you have a contract company that's working, and there's often these competing narratives. And in the case of the fish kill, there's some equipment that failed, and there's some dispute between two sides about what's the problem in this case, and there's some different roles that get played. But if you look at, like, a lot of times companies and contractors might create a narrative and they don't want to be at fault, so they're all pointing fingers to the other group. So I think there's a managing factor that you have to have. You want to have the groups involved, but perhaps what you do is you work with each one separately at first so that you can get a clear picture of where their involvement is. And then as needed, you can bring things together to get more detail and have some of that discussion. I think sometimes you try to bring too many people into the room at first. You get really... we don't want shouting matches. We don't want arguments. We want to try to stick to the facts as much as possible.
And if you don't do that right away, too, I'm sure each company's circling the wagons and saying, okay, what are we going to share? What are we not going to share? I think that's why it's important, even before the incidents happen, you're working out some kind of relationship with these contractors and vendors on, if something happens, here's how this works, right? Yep. There's transparency. We want to learn from this. It's blame-free. It's very objective, and get their buy-in on being able to share the information that's important for an effective analysis.
I know it really, really works well when the primary and the contractor are both Taproot trained and have had that experience and can work through it together that way. That's usually works very well.
There's a lot less defensiveness, at least when they've both seen the process. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of times the first time anybody goes through a major investigation, there's a lot of apprehension. Sure. And having knowledge about, this is a process that's not looking for who to pin the blame on, but for better understanding of our processes. I've seen a lot of different ones where like the outcome of it was recommendations to their contractor and how to change. They can't necessarily say you got to do this, but they can say on our site you need to strengthen these parts of your system. And there's been I think a better relationship between contractors and customers there when they have those kind of discussions. They can be open about it.
And if the main company, if they can trust a vendor to do their own investigation and come with the results and the corrective actions they're going to put in place, well, if they all understand that, hey, we're not going to come to you with the same old tried and true corrective actions. We're not going to blame anybody. We're not going to retrain people. We're not going to, make more rules. We're not going to discipline people. But here's what we do recommend. This is what we're going to be doing to make sure. And those corrective actions it's going to be easy to see that they're supporting people not to make the same mistakes that they made to cause that incident, right? So if everybody understands the process, they understand what good corrective actions look like at the end of that process, then I think there's a lot more confidence that everything was handled appropriately. We're not going to have to deal with this again.
And I think another thing with confidence, leadership wants to have confidence that all the stones have been turned over, that people have looked thoroughly at things. And I think, again, thinking back to like who needs to be on your team, having a good facilitator that knows how to do a good investigation, a good, facilitating the process, I think is key. Having the right people in the room when you're asking questions. Thinking back to that internal expert, why you need to have those internal experts going through it is because a lot of times people imagine that a process just works. They have, we designed this to happen this way, and it must happen that way because we designed it. I mean, I wrote the procedure. It's a great procedure. I know that it works, and they have got all these things that they imagine of the way that things happen. And there's reasons for that, right? We wrote this here because we had this problem and we wrote this step. I think sometimes getting a good picture of who's in the room is going to help you understand what happened, what really happens, and get a difference between what you imagine and how it really gets done. So I think there's a good element of that, having the right people in the room for that. One of the last areas to talk about, I think, is investigations are a skill. We know that it takes time to get better at investigations. So one of the positions that you might consider on an investigation team is who needs to develop that skill. A lot of times younger workers, maybe new engineers, new process people, new safety people, they need to develop that skill. So you want to involve them in investigations before it's their time to lead one, right? So getting the right kind of people to get experience, getting people that just because you only need one facilitator doesn't mean it doesn't help to have someone else who's had taproot training. Maybe they haven't led an investigation, but they've been through a 2-day course, so they have a good understanding of it. Bringing them in as well as development and skill development, I think, is another thing. So again, don't just think about who has to be on the team for just to get it done, but also who do we need to also develop their skills? That's another thing to consider.
Well, if you look at any championship team, if you go into the sports world, if you look at Wall Street, it's a different level of experience. You've got your veterans there that know the process, that do a really great job and can be mentors to the people that they're bringing in. Somebody maybe young, they have the energy, they want to do a good job, they're willing to do the work. So having that balance between people that are skilled, that are experienced, and bringing in new people, that just helps with the sustainability. Because one day those veterans are going to be gone, right? So you're going to have to get the next group up to speed, and that's the best way to do it.
I had a boss who would include me in things for that purpose, and it really means a lot. It meant a lot to me, and it means a lot to someone who's up and coming or just learning to have that opportunity. They'll remember that throughout their career.
And be willing to do it for the next group that comes through.
Absolutely.
Because they've seen it done with themselves. They see that roadmap.
Mm-hmm. I was thinking too, you got real hesitant about legal, and another group that sometimes people get hesitant about that I've heard great things about is incorporating a union representative. Mm-hmm. If a company has a union in place, and making sure someone from the union is involved in that investigation. And especially if it's a taproot investigation, seeing that we're not focusing on blaming the person, that we're really trying to fix the system. it really made a big difference with their opinion on the outcomes of the investigation being a part of that process.
And that's something as well when you think about training, is getting your union reps through Taproot training so they understand what goes into an investigation. Mm-hmm. I've had several times where I've had clients with unions that they went through the snap chart, just the snap chart at the beginning, and the union rep was like, "This is great. This is exactly what we want to see," because it lays it all out. It makes it clear. And yes, there's a mistake, but there's context, there's understanding, it's not looking at just who to pin blame on, but to recognize what's missing.
Yeah, it moves you beyond that mistake. Like, everybody starts to unfocus on the mistake that was made. They understand the context, the conditions around that mistake. They start to think, oh gosh, if I was in that position, I probably would have done the same thing. And when you can get past that blame, then everybody's focused on that context and using it to figure out, how do we make things better for the next person in this situation? And that's what union reps want to see, right? That's their job, is to protect the people.
And I know, especially in companies, and I've worked in union rep and union facilities, and there's definitely a difference in, I would say, sentiment between the office and the union. There's a line drawn, and you definitely feel the difference in the two facilities, even in places that have a healthy relationship with their union. So it makes a difference being willing to have them in there and being open about your investigation. I think transparency in investigation is probably one of the key things. Something else that I've heard people struggle with is getting people to want to be a part of an investigation. So I've heard this before, that's like, oh, they just don't want to do the time. It takes time and everybody's busy, and getting them into the room.
I think that's the key, though, the busyness. Like, I think if you could take their regular work away, they would jump at the chance to make things better.
It sounds like me and jury duty, like I would love to have the time to do that, but no, please, not this time.
And I think that's where that executive support comes in too. It's like, can you line somebody up to take care of the work so this person can concentrate on the investigation instead of just adding more on their plate, because you're not going to get good results.
I think that's super key for someone in, like, say, the safety profession. A lot of times what happens is they have to do this investigation based on their time, that free time that they have, and they don't have a pace plan. They don't have somebody covering for their work, so their daily tasks are constantly ringing phones and pulling them away when they're trying to take time to actually do a thorough investigation. So I think different elements apply to this in a lot of ways, from who should be on the team, what kind of resources you're pulling in from leadership and legal, who are you getting off the floor, and how are you incentivizing people to want to be on an investigation team. I think there's a lot to share on there. And if somebody wants to learn more, if they want to get into this discussion and get some more detail, probably the best place to go is our 5-day advanced team leader training course. We go in depth on who should be on your team. We talk about something called the 3 pizza investigation. We'll save that for another day. And they can learn a lot more from that in that 5-day course. You can find information about it in the links below. Go to our Taproot webpage and look up our store for courses, and you can find the upcoming courses. I know we've got them all over the world, so wherever you are, we probably have a course in your region, maybe not in your city, but in your region. You might have to take a nice short flight to it, or come here to the U.S. and go to some fun places like Tahoe and New Orleans and other fun places. So we got lots of great locations around the world that you can attend. Check those out in the links below. And as always, we will see you guys at the next Taproot podcast.